Let's do this. I'm discount Sam Seder. Cool. Let's do
Okay,
it.
no
And you
problem.
are
Discount Sam Seder.
bad empanada. Cool. Okay.
Okay, that's Enya. That's a different letter entirely. It's N, empanada. Anyway, we can talk about the actual topic that we wanted to talk about, which is just interested in your perception of the whole Nazi Argentina thing.
Okay. We should pretty much let people know where this all started, right?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Sure.
So I believe you posted a tweet trying to
Sure.
explain the Mexican American who killed like 8 people in a mass shooting covered in Nazi tattoos with like a History Channel article about Nazis in South America.
No, that's actually not exactly what it was, but yeah. Basically, it was the discourse around whether people with Latino or Hispanic names, because the right wing was pushing this whole idea that this Mexican American could not possibly be a Nazi because of their name. They were really focusing on the
Just his
fact that they
name?
were, well, his name and also the color of his skin,
Yeah.
his background being from a Hispanic family and having a Latino origin. So they were basically saying there was an article from Axios, the rise of white nationalist Hispanics, and Mike Solana, who's this like right wing VC, shared it and was sort of poo pooing the idea that this could be a thing. White nationalist Hispanics, no way. So, as a
Mhm.
play on the joke of, hey, open a history book, I literally found one of the first things on this was from a History Channel page. And so I made a joke about how you could even just look at it there. And the title of this article is How South America Became a Nazi Haven.
Indeed.
And, yeah, it's basically a rundown of, some very basic stuff.
Yeah, indeed. It's referring to a stereotype, like a very common stereotype that's used for two purposes. One is to legitimize American imperialism against like the center left in Argentina, and two is to deflect from America being itself a post-war Nazi haven.
Oh, no, I'm not doing
That's
that.
why everyone got angry at you.
No, that's why strictly Argentinians got angry at me.
Yeah, that's why
because
they
I've
got
heard-
angry at you. But you know why?
Yes,
Because these
yes,
people
yes.
these people have never heard of this shit in their entire lives. Like the
That's a
perception
problem.
that you have
That's a
is
problem. Then
no,
that's a real problem.
No,
that's a real problem.
what I'm saying is they haven't heard
That's
of
a
your
real problem.
It's not a problem. They haven't heard of your perception of them, which come from a fucking musical. So
No, I don't have any perception of them from a musical. I have a perception.
you do. You absolutely do. You're an American.
No,
you
I
have
don't.
cultural. Yes, your perceptions of things you don't know much about comes like everyone else comes through cultural osmosis. You don't really know much about certain things, and you have these sort of stereotypical
You know
ideas
nothing
of what
about,
they're like.
dude. You know nothing about me.
I know
Why
about
are
you're a generic
why are you-
American. You don't know how to
I'm
pronounce
a generic
empanada.
American. Okay,
That's
okay.
about
You
all I
don't
need
know-
to know.
Okay, so I mispronounced empanada.
I mean,
give me a break.
Would you
buddy.
like me to provide you some academic articles about this exact stereotype and how it came to be? I can do it right now.
It's like basic history. Like it's basic history.
It's basic history. What about is basic history?
What do you mean that there were? I mean, obviously there are white supremacists and neo-Nazis, and far right-wing extremists.
Well, what does
all
that have to do
over
with-
all over the world. All over the world.
What does this American one have
Yeah.
to do with Argentina, though?
Oh, I was bringing up the fact that there is a such thing as white supremacist Latinos and Hispanics, because that was the premise of the article that I was replying to. That's it.
That wouldn't really
anything
make
that
much
you
sense
anything more.
because,
Why
for
wouldn't
one-
it?
Well, for one, Nazis who moved to, let's say, South America, they're not Latinos or Hispanics.
Sure,
Okay.
of course not. But you're acting like they didn't
Two,
also
we're talking
decide to
about-
set up. But
We're
you're-
talking
hold
about
on.
white people
Hold on,
and
hold
brown
on.
people.
Hold
The
on.
guy who did this in the US was certainly not white or Aryan or whatever the fuck you want to call it, like the Nazis did. So referring to that in the first place doesn't really make much sense, does it?
Well, no, it makes plenty of sense because you're under the impression that like the neo-Nazis that the Nazis that left Nazi Germany after the war or during the war and moved to South America, they didn't intertwine and mingle with the people there and have families of people there or share their ideology at the very least with people there.
Okay, like who?
It's not like they just what?
Did they share them with this guy?
I didn't say this guy, dude. You're bringing in
Okay.
something completely different because you seem to
It
have
seems to be like
misread
you're bringing
the
in something completely
entire.
different and irrelevant to the question
How
at
am I
hand.
bringing the
Well, it's
question at
a
hand?
Mexican mass
Was
shooter in the USA.
are there yes, and that's completely on the United States of America and its gun culture and its own neo-Nazi problem. But then there was a secondary discussion surrounding this whole thing about whether Latinos and Hispanic people can be white supremacists.
When they're
And I was just
when
bringing up
Americans use the term Latino and Hispanics, etc., what they mean is brown people. They don't mean like blonde hair, blue-eyed neo-Nazis. They mean brown people. And I think you know that, or at least, subconsciously you should know that. So
so
it doesn't
wait,
really
so
make much
are
sense
you
to refer to South America. When they're saying that, they're not specifically referring to the fact that he's a Spanish speaker or whatever, or that his parents were from a Spanish-speaking country or from Latin America. They're referring to the guy's perceived race.
right? And I'm telling you that they assumed that because he was a brown person with a background, his family came from south of the American border, that he could not possibly be a white supremacist. So I was simply using a historical fact to show how there's actually a long history of this ideology being welcomed or accepted in throughout the world, period, but specifically in this conversation regarding the surrounding conversation around what we were just talking about in South America.
I believe that you were actually referring to largely erroneous stereotype of Argentina specifically, not
I
just
never
South
said the word
America.
Argentina.
We all
I
know
never
what you
said the
mean.
word
You're an
Argentina.
American. We all know what the cultural perception of these.
No,
so-called
actually,
Nazi
when I
behavior
think of right wing South American countries, the first country
right wing,
I think of
not Nazi,
when
right wing.
when I think of far right wing, white supremacist, neo Nazi sort of subcultures going on in South America and spreading there, the first place I would think of actually, simply because of modern times, is actually Brazil. But you're welcome to assume I would think Argentina, I guess, for some reason. Again,
For
I
some
never
reason,
said Argentina.
like for example, the very long-standing stereotype, specifically in American society, that
But dude,
Argentina
you're projecting
is
all sorts
singularly
of things.
unique. Yeah, you
You're
retweeted people saying this. You literally retweeted people saying this.
I
as
didn't
well.
retweet. I didn't retweet anyone saying anything. The only people
Okay.
I responded to were Argentinians who came at me to try to say that there's no such thing as racism in their country and the Nazis never went there, period. And only in my replies to them did I ever bring up the country Argentina. And you're welcome to look through that because it's all right there and all your viewers can. This whole conversation is about you, Bad Empanada, having a projection of something that didn't happen onto me.
Ooh,
You stereotyped. I mean, that's what happened, buddy. I don't know what to tell you. Because whatever you're gonna bring up.
So when you brought up Nazis in South America, and you referred to a History Channel article, specific. This is the History Channel, by the way. The History Channel is notorious for making documentaries where they claim to have found Adolf Hitler alive in Argentina. They've made 4 of those. So you cite a History Channel article specifically about Nazis, actual post-war Nazis escaping to South America. And we all know that when you say that, you're mostly referring to Argentina because that's where the stereotype is, whether you will admit that or not.
I wasn't referring to any.
So you want, and then you deflect that now by referring to Bolsonaro, a contemporary Trump-inspired leader. Is that right?
Yeah, because my point.
So you were citing a History Channel article to refer to Bolsonaro when the History Channel article was talking about post-war Nazi escapees.
That's not what I said, dude. Do you have a habit of talking in circles like this? Because it's not what I said at all. Number one, I said the use of the History Channel was part of the meme of open a history book. You could read it in my tweet. I even reference it. So that's why I specifically used the History Channel. So
you say open a history book and you use the History Channel.
Because on Twitter, everyone's
snarky. So you intentionally said something that is incorrect.
I think you're
a right winger.
So you're saying that there were no Nazis that left Germany and found a safe haven in South America?
That's not what you believe. That's not what you believe.
Dude, I'm telling you what I believe right now, and you can't accept it because you had your little, your whole thing, your whole
simple
little
question
stream.
for you, my friend.
Your whole little stream was set up to tackle me on something I never said
Uh-huh.
because you, Bad Empanada, misread the entire tweet. And everyone in the replies when you came at me on Twitter were telling you, dude, you misread it. As long as half of Argentinian Twitter that was coming after me, everyone was telling you guys, I never said Argentina in any single tweet
That's your
until I was
scapegoat.
replying.
Because you're an American,
dude?
you're an
How is that
American
a
referring to a very specific U.S. constructed, by the way, it was constructed before the war was even over, mythology used to legitimize imperialism. Specifically, this idea of South America being this sort of singular Nazi haven, which is why History Channel articles like that
No
exist.
way. I don't believe South America is ever United States of America, baby. Number one in bringing Nazis from Nazi Germany. And not only were they the number one in bringing them, number one in turning a blind eye or helping other countries also do the same. I mean, the United States of America knew all about the rat lines. That's nothing new, man.
They didn't just know about them; they wore them.
And certain, in some instances, they helped set
so
them
you
up,
have a
no
bunch
doubt
of
about
people.
it.
You have a bunch of people angry at you for spreading this stereotype. This stereotype, by the way, which is specifically weaponized against center-left anti-neoliberal politicians in Argentina still today.
Dude, I can talk
why,
about
why can't they be angry about that exactly?
I mean, if they want to be angry about that, that's really weird.
You said to me, I believe
that's
that it was wrong for me to say that this idea that you're spreading is imperialism. Apparently, how is that wrong?
How is it? How is that imperialism for me to just simply state a historical fact?
Well, for one,
that there were.
For one, this idea of there being a special Nazi haven in Argentina comes from before the war ended. It comes directly from the US government. They literally released a book all around the world warning of the threat of the Fourth Reich in Argentina called the Blue Book. Then from that, that spawned the musical Evita, which basically just spread that idea even more. And that's how Americans got this whole History Channel-esque idea of Argentina being this
most
singular
Americans
Nazi haven. And
most Americans have no idea about any of this. Most Americans, as
if you ask any American, what do you know about Argentina? There's like a 50-50 chance they'll tell you nothing or Nazis. That's all they know.
They'll tell you Messi, baby, and the Argentinian World Cup soccer team. What are you talking about,
This is the sort of thing
man?
that it's weaponized. It's very easy to weaponize too. You think this idea is not weaponized? You think people don't say to like anyone who calls himself a Peronist,
I'll tell you,
a Nazi?
the most I've heard about Argentina, quite frankly, has been from other South Americans who have had bad experiences with Argentina. That's honestly the most I hear about Argentina. United States of America doesn't know Argentina outside, again, of their World Cup soccer team. Trust me. No one here talks about Evita or any of that.
There's certainly more than enough cultural osmosis for Americans to know about this Nazi Argentina stereotype, which is probably why all of your followers, just with their taken for granted ideas that they receive from this cultural osmosis, got very angry at me refuting that idea.
But dude, are you claiming that you can't talk about the fact that there were indeed Nazis that escaped to Argentina? Is that what you're claiming?
Let me give you a very apt analogy here. Let's imagine an African-American politician in the USA is corrupt. Do you think and someone's like, Africans can't be corrupt, that doesn't make any sense. And you decide to respond to that by posting like the Freedom Institute's graph of corruption with African countries at the top. Do you think that would be like a thing to do that makes any sense at all and that isn't just reinforcing damaging stereotypes about other countries?
Not what happened at all. Let's pose this another way. Do you talk about Ukraine at all?
Yeah.
You do. And what do you think about what's going on with the Ukraine?
Wow, literally,
Ukraine.
A complete 100% topic change. Holy shit.
Well, no, because I'm asking. No, it's not, because it's the same thing you just did. You just brought up African American.
No,
president
I'm making an analogy. I'm making an analogy to what you did.
I'm making an analogy to
what you did
as well.
What you did is take
Ukraine, right?
What you did is take someone who is a Latin American, completely irrelevant European or Africa or anything here. What you did is take someone who is a Latin American descended person in the US who did something awful, and to explain that the fact that a Latin American person can have his ideology, you point to people in South America. I'm wondering how this would be different to that scenario that I just outlined.
No, because that's not what it was, man. The individual is completely like, maybe, I don't know, maybe because you're not you're from Australia, right?
Africans
Maybe
can be
because
corrupt, right? It's okay for
you're.
me to refer to the corrupt
What are
Africa
you talking?
stereotype.
What are you talking about, man? No, the difference. No, the equivalent would be if there was some sort of African mass shooter here who was driven by white supremacy or neo-Nazi ideology, and then me pointing to, oh, there is a history in Africa of this. Just look at South Africa. It's the same fucking thing. That's the
Well,
analogy,
actually,
man.
the sensical analogy, if you want it to be like that, would be an African American neo-Nazi doing a mass shooting and then being like, this is somehow due to like this fringe neo-Nazi group in South Africa or something, which would make no sense because it's a fucking African American in the USA who's probably never even been to Africa in his life.
But we are talking about a secondary thing here. And let me get back to my analogy, because you keep going back to the shooter, and that's not what this discussion turned into. Yes, that was the catalyst for this whole conversation that came here in the United States. But the main topic of conversation, by the time I got to it with that reference to that article, was strictly, can Latinos and Hispanics be white supremacists or neo-Nazis? But anyway, so you talk about Ukraine, right? And
you refer to it. We're not talking about Ukraine.
But you talk about Ukrainian. But we weren't
you
talking
think
about
I don't? You
African
think I don't know how
presidents
this
either.
works? It's like, buddy, you love Putin. I know exactly how this works. Putin tanky.
No,
Putin
I don't
tanky.
think you love Putin. I don't think you love Putin. But you talk about Ukrainian. You talk about Ukrainian neo-Nazis, right? You talk about Ukrainian neo-Nazis, right?
Yeah.
I talk about them too, right? They exist, right?
I absolutely would not just randomly refer to like Ukrainian neo-Nazis in a context that's completely removed from them for no reason whatsoever. No.
If someone of Eastern European background committed a mass shooting here, and they had some sort of background that brought you back there, you would bring up. And in America, liberals started to say, oh, they can't be neo-Nazis. Ukraine is all about no neo-Nazis there. That's Russian imperialist propaganda. You would no doubt about it. And so would I say that's bullshit. You could see that there's a history of Ukrainian Nazis.
There's a bit of an issue here, right? We're talking about Ukrainians and then we're talking about Ukraine. In this other case, we're talking about a Mexican and then we're talking about South America.
No,
and we're also
there was
talking
a whole
about 80
conversation. There was a whole conversation about Latinos and Hispanics all together. That was a conversation
an American
here,
idea,
dude.
which is completely
and that's what I'm talking about, man. Maybe that's where there's some sort of misunderstanding or language barrier.
No, I think the misunderstanding, there's no misunderstanding. Like, you were referring to a stereotype that is used constantly to legitimize imperialism.
It's not a stereotype, man.
It absolutely is a stereotype.
It is not a stereotype. It's a historical fact,
it's not,
dude.
Okay.
It happened.
You're okay. It's a historical fact then when all of your followers respond to me being like, all Argentines have German surnames. Like, why is your father a Nazi? Things like that. It's not a stereotype. 200 Nazi war criminals in Argentina. That is not a stereotype. It's actually true. Like, you're not going to convince me that these people know anything about what they're talking about. They're basing any of this on historical facts.
I never threw down any number.
It's obviously a stereotype. I have fucking academic articles right here, fucking ready to go, fucking fully torqued. They've got fucking massive hard-ons here, ready to go about this stereotype. Specifically in the US and how it came to be. It's clearly a real thing that exists, or there wouldn't be articles about it.
Okay, and the fact that Nazis went to Germany also is, Nazis from Germany went to Argentina and other South American countries obviously happened too. Otherwise, there wouldn't be articles about it. What are you talking about?
We're not specifically talking about did Nazis go to Argentina or did they go anywhere else. We're talking about a specific stereotype, the one that your History Channel article specifically references.
I didn't
which
even link
is
to any fucking article, man. I didn't link
you
to any article. I
posted a
used to fucking
screenshot of an article.
screenshot. Yeah, because the whole point was just to point out that, yeah, there's a history of Nazis and white supremacy in South America and Latin America.
The history
You
of
wanted
Nazis
to,
and
you
white
were
supremacy in the
you were
US.
foaming at the mouth for some content that you saw somebody post
I am not
that
foaming
and
at the mouth for content at all.
and read 100 things into it. What are you talking about? You're the one sitting there prepared apparently dozens of academic articles, and I just threw up the stream right now.
Yeah, right. Because
I just threw up the stream right now.
If you don't like, yeah, like I don't know why you are like bragging about not knowing what you're talking about. That's not a good thing. But
I never said I don't know what I'm talking about. I said I didn't need to prepare for this.
This is like kind of a thing that people do when they're not like Sam
You just
Seder
have
acolytes.
academic articles
They know
ready to go
things.
24/7.
Yeah.
You just have
I've
academic
these
articles
things
ready to go 24/7. All right, that's cool. Good. Let's bring them
I
up.
read
Bring them up.
things.
Bring them out. Bring them out. I read things too, man. I read things too.
So, are you you're trying to tell me it's not a stereotype? Like this idea of like Nazi Argentina, this is not a stereotype in the American psyche. It's not a thing. Is that like a correct assessment of what you're telling me?
There's a history of, of obviously American propaganda for all sorts of different countries. And for Argentina, one of them is the United States of America pushed that it was a Nazi haven, sure, because there is some truth into propaganda at times, absolutely.
So they pushed it because there's some truth in the propaganda, right? There's also some truth in the fact that African governments tend to be corrupt. Would it be okay for me
without
to
a doubt, they are corrupt
randomly for no reason?
Oh, no.
In a very clearly problematic context that legitimizes imperialism?
No, but how does it legitimize imperialism to bring up historical fact? I don't understand.
How does it legitimize imperialism? How does it legitimize imperialism for me to say, okay, so Perón invited like 200 Nazis into Argentina. Ergo,
just
Perón
200
was a Nazi.
Right.
Yes, 200. Ergo, Perón was a Nazi. Ergo,
he
people who call themselves Peronists are also Nazis. Ergo, the primary center-left force in Argentina are Nazis, and we should all hate them. That's how this logic works. It's how it's employed. It's very common. So you've never heard of this before?
No, of course I have. But the idea, what makes you think that the guy who helped bring in Nazis from Germany after World War II didn't have Nazi sympathies and feel for these people?
Do you think that like the people in, let's say, hypothetically, because Perón was a very FDR-like leader. Obviously, FDR died before the war was over, but what happened in the US would have happened if he was still the president afterwards. So let's say, hypothetically, FDR had survived the war. He was the one who happened to be in power when the US invited all the Nazis. Would that make him a Nazi?
Yeah, I would say if he brought in Nazis, it would have been really bad for him. Yeah, I think we could have easily said he was a
there's a difference between it being bad and it being like ideologically Nazi. Because the thing
without
is,
a doubt.
When we're talking about like a politician and their ideology, especially a politician like FDR or Juan Domingo Perón, people who were in power for quite a long time. I think FDR was like 12 years, Perón like 9 years, at least the first term. You can look at what they actually did. You don't specifically need to infer things from, like their sympathies or whatever. So you can look at what they actually did and judge off their policies, their politics as implemented in practice, given the fact that they were actually in, heads of state. You can look at that and you can judge whether you're Nazi or not. So given, Perón was very much in his economic policy, pretty much like FDR, social policy like any other, white guy in power at the time.
Perón was not. You're trying to push forward that Perón was some sort of progressive hero. Is that really what you're trying to do?
Okay, can you explain like with some sort of reference to something that he actually did? Like, what do you mean by progressive hero? Was FDR a progressive hero?
Oh, I would say for some people he is, and some people he isn't. I mean,
economically,
sure, he was
compared to what there was before.
Man.
So
sure,
how is it wrong?
Sure.
Perón was not economically progressive compared to what there was before.
Well, sure, yeah, but just because you're economically progressive doesn't mean you're just
Exactly.
You're just
FDR was also a racist,
period, right? Yeah, yeah. That's right.
So, like, do you think?
So what? What are you trying to say?
I'm trying to say.
I think you think I'm somebody else. That's the problem here, because I got no problem saying that FDR was without a doubt a racist. FDR was without a doubt
The point is that I'm not
Go
trying
ahead.
to delegitimize FDR here. I'm not trying to attack FDR. I'm drawing a comparison
I'm
between him
consuming.
and Juan Domingo Perón, who are very similar in terms of what they actually did.
Okay. All right. So, are you trying to say? What are you trying to say out of that?
What I'm trying to
not
say
being-
is that this guy, due to his sort of anti-American, anti-imperialist stance and the fact that he was the first politician to ever draw his base from the working class and take some sort of action against the landowning Spanish oligarchy, the fact that he also, after that, took in a few hundred Nazi war criminals, most of whom he had no knowledge of. Most of what he took were
Oh, there were a lot more than a few hundred.
In terms of war criminals, there is 180.
That was based on a what was like an Argentinian council in the late 90s, right?
It was based on a 2003 was the last revised report. 2003, essentially a convention of historians from Germany, Argentina, the US, pretty much everywhere, who made a list of 180 confirmed Nazi war criminals who entered Argentina in various capacities. Most of them were actually Croatian, not German.
Sure.
So,
okay. The Nazis, nonetheless, though. I don't really care whether they're from Germany or not.
And then there were also scientists, whatever.
Right. Just like the U.S. Right.
Like this was a transatlantic, transnational network. Pretty much every single country that had aspirations to like be something after the war did this, including the Soviet Union.
I get it. You're separate. You're saying specifically 100. What did you say? 158 war criminals. So the other thousands of Nazis that came in, 180 war criminals.
Well, there were about 20,000 Germans post-war who settled in Argentina, and about 80,000 more who passed through the country to a different final destination.
Okay.
Compared to the US, that is quite.
I saw that an Argentinian researcher recently, I think like in the past like 3 years ago, I think it was, discovered a list of 12,000.
I'm so happy that you mentioned that.
I know.
So that's a pre-war list.
I know.
That's a pre-war list from the 1930s.
Sure.
The reason that we have that list was actually seized by the government when they raided a Nazi Party of Germany. What do you call them in English?
Cool.
Like
So let me just get this. Let me just get. Okay. So continue. Go ahead. Finish what you're saying. I don't want to interrupt.
So that list is of Nazi Party of Germany members from the pre-war German migrant community in Argentina. Right? It's not Nazis from Germany who escaped. And the reason that we have that list is because the government at the time raided their offices and seized it.
Okay. So so you're saying to me that there weren't that many Nazis in Germany because the Nazis that excuse me, I'm sorry, I misspoke. Thank you for pointing it out. That there weren't that many Nazis in Argentina because they got there before the war ended.
What I'm saying is that's irrelevant to what we're talking about, which is post-war Nazi escapees.
No, what we're talking about is
the pre-war German migrant community. You're talking about something completely different. You want to talk about like pre-war Nazi German migrant communities. Every single country had those. The US had the biggest. The US had a rally of 30,000 Nazis in Madison Square Garden in 1939.
I'm in New York City. I know all about it.
So
I don't deny it.
Argentina is a Nazi haven because the Nazis agitated among German immigrants in the 1930s. That's a very different claim to what we were talking about before, which was post-war.
Dude, they held Nazi rallies in Argentina.
Fleeing to Argentina.
They held just like here in the U.S. They held Nazi rallies in Argentina.
Yeah, there was a Nazi rally in Argentina held at the Jockey Club as well. That is the equivalent of Madison Square Garden in Buenos Aires. Do you know who supported that? Do you know who attended that?
Go ahead, tell me.
The same oligarchs who the US then supported and they supported and smeared Perón with the Nazi label. Isn't that great?
Okay, sure. Why do you keep acting like I'm going to defend the United States? This is terrible, dude.
The entire reason that I want to have this conversation.
But why can't you just say that the whole conversation's really weird to me because this was the same thing I was experiencing with Argentinian people too, like sending me video images of 9/11 and all sorts of American neo-Nazis and stuff. Hell yeah, man. The United States The United States is horrible, dude. They are the
Mm-hmm.
number one importer, exporter of white supremacy and neo-Nazism. I'm just saying it's
It's
super
because
weird to me.
it's
It's super weird to me that when I just simply point out historical fact that Nazis were indeed all over the world, including
well,
South America,
that's the
the
thing.
only
The
people.
reason why people get
And
angry
see,
at
that's
that
where I
is
get
because
weird.
there's
That's
a
why I get weird
specific
about it. That's
stereotype. You know,
eh,
people. There's
no.
there's no specific
There's plenty
stereotype about like the couple thousand Nazis who went to Australia. There's no specific stereotype about the hundreds of Nazis who went to New Zealand. There's no specific stereotype about the thousands upon thousands of Nazi collaborators in France.
dude.
The stereotype is Argentina.
All those. Are
So
those, all
that's
those
why
articles,
that's why when
all
people
the
see you
articles,
posting that, they go
all
angry.
the articles say, all the articles you can find online all say South America, South America. Even the various different
That's
Jewish groups
precisely
that
the
I've
point.
read, that I've read.
That's
all from
precisely the point. There is this
because they're specifically
specific
talking about.
focus.
No, it's not a focus. Yeah, there's a focus on South American Nazis when they're talking about South America. That's it, buddy.
You weren't talking about South America though. And also,
you were talking about Latino and Hispanic.
I'm trying to explain to you why those people got angry at you, because
I don't.
there is this massive stereotype that isn't that of Argentina being like a singular special Nazi haven. And you're not going to tell me that you've never heard of this before. There's no fucking way. Have you ever watched the History Channel? It's impossible. They run reruns of that shit every fucking day. Like
I actually don't watch the History Channel.
We had a terrible childhood, but there is a specific stereotype emanating from the USA, which originates in the wartime US with the ambassador to Argentina creating this idea of like Argentina planning to harbor the Fourth Reich and create like the resurgent Nazi empire post-war. And from that, this stereotype, which eventually led to stuff like the Evita musical and stuff like that, spread throughout the consciousness of Americans, and it created this idea of Argentina as this singular sort of Nazi haven. So when I and many others saw you posting that, right, that's what we think of.
Okay. All right.
So that's why Argentines get angry at you, because for one, it is true, obviously, that there were Nazis in Argentina. It's true that there were Nazis in many countries. But it's specifically because it's literally a fucking History Channel article. Come on, it's referring to the stereotype using like
it's not a insane stereotype if it happened, man.
No, there were not.
Ridiculous.
Hitler did not come to Argentina in a fucking U-boat.
No, I never said Hitler. See, you're not trying to put words in my mouth.
That's the stereotype. The stereotype is like it takes a grain of truth and exaggerates it to an absurd degree in order to deflect.
No. But you are using the absurdity of Hitler escaping Germany right now. But that's not what you brought up before.
I brought that up. I brought that up as an example of how the stereotype operates. Like the reason why this idea of Hitler escaping to Argentina, right, rather than, for example, Hitler escaping to the US, which at least numerically, like by percentage, would make more sense. The reason why there's that idea of like Hitler escaping to Argentina and all of that is because of that stereotype created and spread by the Americans.
You are now trying to conflate a wild conspiracy theory with actual true facts.
I'm not conflating anything. I'm using that as an example of
I don't listen, dude.
Stereotype existing, basically.
Oh, but if it's a historical fact that Nazis did indeed escape Germany, and even before that left Germany or wherever they were, Croatia, wherever you said most of them came from, Nazis in Europe came over to South America, and we are talking in the context of this discourse that was going on of whether Latino and Hispanic people can be Nazis and white supremacists. Then I think it's very relevant to bring up just a basic historical fact that, yeah, there's a history of Nazis and white supremacy in Argentina, in Chile, in Brazil, in Uruguay, in Paraguay, in you name it. It's all over the place. And that's all that this was. And if a bunch of Argentinian people got upset about it, either they misunderstood me, which that sucks, or I saw a lot of right-wing Argentinian people also going at me. They're trying to deny their history.
They wouldn't go at you. They love that. They love that. They love that. They say that Perón did it. Every 2 weeks, they print a new article about that. They absolutely love it.
Well, there was a few people who were denying it who definitely were right wingers, sharing all sorts of far right wing memes, and they were telling
Mhm.
me that that never happened. Again, this is a very small internet portion of the community, but I mean, in the same sense, I heard from people from Mexico, people from Chile, people from Bolivia, people from Peru, all bring to me their experience and them saying, "Yeah, there's white supremacy and neo Nazis here, 100%," and then also bring up how weird they thought it was that the only people who had a problem with it was Argentinians, who they say they experience racism from all the time in their home countries.
So you think it's weird that Argentines have a problem with you spreading this, what I
No,
just
I
said,
think
this
it's.
this
I think it's
historical
a combination.
stereotype of Argentina as like this special
I think.
Nazi haven? That's what people are
I
angry
think.
about. It's not this idea that
Mm,
Nazis went to Argentina at all. Obviously they did. It's this idea that Argentina is this special Nazi haven.
but I never called it a special Nazi haven. I posted literally a headline that said South America was a Nazi
Okay.
haven, wasn't even a special Nazi haven, wasn't even
It's a
the
History
Nazi
Channel
haven.
article. I mean,
Yeah,
you
and you just
probably
said it
didn't
was
read the
great. You
article,
loved
but
watching. You said you loved watching History Channel. That's why I didn't share the article, dude.
yeah,
I just
when I
posted the
was
screenshot
11
of
years
the.
old, I thought it was fucking
Well, you
awesome.
just
I
said how
loved
great it
Ancient
was. I'm the
Aliens.
one who told you. I'm the one who told you I didn't watch it at all, and I don't know what to tell you, man. You told me how great it was just now. Um, I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. This is sort of like a silly conversation because I agree with you with everything you're going to say about America. And
It's not.
how.
I'm not complaining about America. I'm not saying America is bad here. I'm not just saying that. I'm saying that you could make that point, for one, in a way that makes a lot more sense, and for two, without referring to a myth that is constantly used to legitimize imperialism against Argentina.
How
I
do you
think
bring up
challenging that myth
neo-Nazi?
is better.
How do you bring up Nazis in South America without you claiming it's going to be some sort of imperialism?
Why bring
I
up
mean, how do you?
Nazis in South America in that context
I
at
just
all?
told you, dude, because the context was talking about they were bringing up how there is a rise in in white supremacy and Nazism within
Mm-hmm.
Latino and Hispanic communities, and people were
Mm-hmm.
denying that could be possible. So I
Right.
simply showed some historical context in terms of how South American countries, all the way back in the 1940s and before that even, but let's stick with post World War II, we're welcoming Nazis from Germany and elsewhere in Europe to come to their countries and find a safe haven, just like it was also happening elsewhere.
Okay. So Mexico is in North America. But
Right,
apart
but we
from
were.
that, the explanation
Are you saying?
for
Are you
the
saying? Are you going to
explanation
argue that Mexican people wouldn't consider them part of the broader Latino
you
or
said
Hispanic
South
community?
America. I don't think most people consider themselves part of a Latino or Hispanic community in Latin America now. But
Okay.
apart from that, if you want to explain Latino neo-Nazis, specifically brown-skinned Latino neo-Nazis in the
I mean,
US,
half my
there's a much,
family,
there
half
are
my
much better
family.
ways to do that. For example, you can refer to the fact that the reason why these people exist now is because they're
All right,
all radicalized on the internet, where no
well,
one
now,
sees them
but
and they
this
don't
is,
see each other.
but now you're like tone policing. Now you're going, oh no, you
I
didn't say things
I
exactly how I
absolutely
wanted you
am
to say it.
tone policing you because
Yeah,
you're spreading a
that's so
damaging myth
weird.
used to legitimize imperialism. You literally in this
Okay,
country,
so
like
do you talk
if
about
if you
you talk
talk in
about
English
do
about
you
voting for like some fucking center left Biden esque like fucking lesser evil Peronist
I don't tell
candidate,
anybody to vote for I don't tell anybody to vote for anybody.
it's
You
just
must
an
be confusing
example.
me with
Okay,
someone
it's
else.
an I'm not
Okay.
accusing you of anything.
So
Here
here's an
in this, I'm
example.
trying to give you an example of how this narrative is used to legitimize essentially imperialism against Argentina. You mentioned like, you vote for like the lesser evil in Argentina, which is pretty much always the Peronists, and you get called a Nazi by Americans. And the reason why that
That
happens
must
is
be
because of this
really specific
stereotype.
because most Americans have no idea, dude. I mean, you could say the same about people who vote for Democrats when there's a history of the KKK and literal former Ku Klux Klan Grand Wizards being Democrats or whatever. I mean, you could say the same thing here.
The only person who does that is fucking Dinesh D'Souza, because obviously we're taught, there was no like
Yeah, that's what I'm getting
Democrat
at, buddy.
Republican shift
That's what I'm getting at.
in
I'm talking
Argentina.
about how if you can't just like come to the historical fact that yeah, we could say that
We're
there
not
were
talking
Nazis
about
in
base
South
historical
America
facts
or
here.
Argentina. But we are though, because that's what you have a problem with. You're saying I
The
shouldn't bring
problem
it up
isn't
because
with the historical
it's
facts.
imperialism.
It's one thing to talk about this, honestly or whatever within the context. It's another to just randomly bring up this myth to get a simple little gotcha on some right-wing account on Twitter. Like the entire reason why people get pissed off at you is because they're sick of seeing this.
Well, the only people
this sort of stereotype being used against them.
The only people who got pissed at me were a bunch of Argentinians, and that's a huge tell to me.
Why wouldn't they get pissed at you?
When I hear the rest,
it's a huge tell to you. Why wouldn't they get pissed at you?
Why didn't any of the other people in South American countries? Because again, the article said South America. Why did
because there's not any sort of cultural stereotype that this is what they are. There's no
in Brazil.
No,
there's no cultural. There's no cultural stereotype about
there is
Brazil.
Absolutely no stereotype among Americans, among foreigners, that Brazil is a special Nazi haven. You're not going to tell me where's the musical about Brazil? Where's the where's the U.S. State Department?
With this musical, dude.
Where's the U.S.
musical, man?
Yeah, it's an incredibly fucking well-known musical that had a massive cultural effect. It's basically, if Americans know about Argentina, dude, half the time it's because of the fucking musical. Half the time it's from the New York Times articles about. Like you're essentially trying to discount something that is so well known that there's like an entire academic literature about it, like American cultural perceptions of Argentina.
Dude, the fact that there is such a major discourse going on in this country about how people of Hispanic or Latino origin could not be white supremacists or Nazis should tell you that, in fact, that there's not such, at least in modern day American culture, not such a big stereotype. When did that Evita musical come out? No one even
talking about Argentina here, not about American culture and American Nazis.
You are talking about Argentina again.
Oh yeah, X-Men Origins. That's another great one. X-Men Origins, like I believe the opening scene of that movie is like a mutant Nazi hunter in Argentina in Villa Gesell, which is a beach resort town, but for some reason it's in the Andes. So it is a very well-known cultural stereotype about Argentina and the US, and it's very damaging. It's employed fairly often by the American media to drum up hatred of the Argentine center left.
But that's also another historical fact that there were indeed Nazi hunters specifically in countries like Brazil and Argentina, because that's where Nazis were. I mean,
you seem to just be arguing that the stereotype is correct. Is that true? Is that what you're trying to say here? Because when I mention the stereotype, you keep repeating, but it's true, but it's true, but it's true. But the problem isn't that people are just saying,
you're trying to call historical fact the stereotype, dude. Okay. It's one thing to say the United States of America weaponized these facts and used it as propaganda.
They didn't weaponize. They didn't simply weaponize facts. Like, it's one thing to say Nazis went to Argentina, Nazis went to Brazil, Nazis went to the USA.
That's all I said.
It's another thing to say Nazis went to Argentina. Not all the Nazis went to Argentina. The Nazis tried to make the Fourth Reich in Argentina. Argentina is this special, secret, super special Nazi haven.
Who in this conversation said that? Because it wasn't me.
The entire issue that I had with your tweet was that you were essentially spreading this myth of South America as this singular Nazi haven, specifically Argentina as this singular special Nazi haven, whether you meant to or not. And that stereotype, that myth is the thing that's not true. We're not simply arguing that no Nazis came to Argentina. We're talking about this specific myth of Argentina as the Nazi haven. That is the thing that's damaging. I never said that. That is the thing that people get angry at. That is why you had people screaming at you in Spanish.
Then that's on them, man. That's on them because they need to learn reading comprehension and see what I read.
I don't know. I guess they just need to learn to have supposed leftists just spreading imperialist ideas about their country to deal with.
Oh, those people had no idea who I was. Please, I mean the idea that again, let's bring up the fact that we all talk about Ukrainian neo-Nazis, right? Because they exist. It's a fact they exist. Yet for some reason, you don't also think that being that there is a country literally right now doing imperialism on them and using the propaganda that there are Nazis in Ukraine as their reason for doing imperialism, you won't though say, oh, we should back off on bringing up Ukrainian neo-Nazis because Russia's weaponizing that fact to propagandize and use it to legitimize what they're doing to innocent people in Ukraine. You don't do that though, right? You would never do that. I wouldn't do that
I
either
would do
because I
that.
don't think.
Depends.
Really, you've done that before. Then you've done that before. You've done that before. So when you
Yeah,
so you
I
don't talk
don't
about
think
Ukrainian
that
neo-Nazis.
there being neo-Nazis in Ukraine means that the country should be invaded. Yes.
Oh, good. Exactly. You
It's
shouldn't
also
think that,
not an equivalent scenario because what is the context of bringing this up exactly? It's just like a random
dude. Because
American
you're.
bringing up like
Oh my God, no,
a
dude.
decades old stereotype.
Here's the funny thing, dude. You're talking to probably the only leftist streamer that has a show dedicated to talking about white supremacy, neo-Nazis, online far-right reactionaries. I know you don't know who I am.
That
I'm a
sounds like
nobody. Who the
Bellingcat.
fuck am I? What?
Sounds like Bellingcat.
Okay, well, I'm not Bellingcat. Bellingcat is not a left. They wouldn't consider themselves to be a leftist news organization. That's very clever, though, because I know that there's a well-intentioned bad rap on Bellingcat because they do some sketchy stuff. But to tie me to them for your audience is very clever. I enjoy that. Nice move there. But I've been covering neo-Nazis, white supremacists since I started a show back in 2018. It was my beat when I started working on the Majority Report back in 2011 and co-hosted a show with Michael Brooks. So you're probably talking to the American leftist who focuses on white supremacists and neo-Nazis in the United States of America more than any other leftist does. And the idea that you don't think it's relevant, that you constantly bring up. See, for me, I just want to talk about fucking the fact that neo-Nazis are all over the fucking world. That's it. I want to talk about the fact that you should not be hiding the fact, denying the fact that neo-Nazis exist in your country, that country, this country, because they exist and everyone needs to come to terms with it if they want to defeat it. If you're an anti-fascist, you need to talk about it. So when I'm bringing up Ukraine, my point is, you say when I bring up the fact that Nazis fled to South America, and again, I'm not even talking about Argentina specifically. You keep doing that, but if you want me to say that, fine. When I bring up Nazis in Argentina, you say doing so is giving into American imperialism because they've used it before for their propaganda.
I say that you're.
So I am saying. So I'm saying, why isn't it the same thing? Why isn't the same thing? So maybe perhaps you are inadvertently doing that to Ukraine.
If you're inadvertently spreading like imperialist propaganda from the fucking 1940s against the country that is still weaponized against that country to this very day, then yeah. I think you should maybe learn to take being called out on that a little bit better.
No one is talking about Nazis in Argentina anymore. In fact, it's quite clear of that.
You pretty much brought it up.
Everyone
knows what the History Channel article was about.
Little me, man. Little me who you just put what was it you put in your headline there? Discount Sam Seder. Apparently, I speak for all of America when I, in 2023, am the one American who brings up Nazism in South America.
No, you're not.
That's the problem. Discussion here.
That's the problem.
No,
you're not.
If that was the case, then why is there literally tons and tons of people? Like, the literal discourse in this country right now is Latinos and Hispanic people cannot be white supremacists and Nazis. That's the basis of this whole conversation, dude. And you're claiming that's not true. The whole reason I even posted that article, that screenshot of that article, you're claiming is not true because everyone in America believes that Nazis and white supremacists are all over Argentina. Okay. You make zero sense, man.
I think I make perfect sense. So there's two separate things here. One is, can Latinos, Hispanics, however you use that term in the US, can they be white supremacists? Yes, they can.
Yes.
Another thing is the way you made that point. By referring to a damaging stereotype that legitimizes imperialism in my country.
And what is that damaging stereotype? What is that?
It's this idea that Argentina is a specific Nazi haven, and specifically that the Peronist ideology, which isn't really an ideology, but people call themselves that nonetheless.
Can you show me when I said that? Can you show me what I
said?
You
don't have to say it to legitimize it. It can be accidental. It can be inadvertent.
That's such bullshit, man. That's such bullshit, man.
How not?
Listen. If you want to have a regular, like, if you wanted to have like a legitimate conversation about that, you would have reached out to me. But instead, you wanted to, pound on your chest and do this whole bravado thing in public.
I'm not really pounding on my chest like doing bravado at all. I'm just sitting here.
What are you talking about? On Twitter, dude, you were having this whole big thing about how I was
actually correcting
the
historical facts with lots of your followers who seem to believe that myth was true. They seem to believe that Like, they got really
Your art.
offended when I pointed out that the US government itself estimated that there were 10,000 Nazi war criminals in the US. They got really mad at that.
Oh, well, I don't know anyone who did that. I mean, I can't speak for all people who would get, but I certainly
my
know that there are
problem isn't with you
10,000,
specifically. My problem is
at
with this
least
myth
10,000.
is with this stereotype in general. My problem
Cool,
is
but
that I don't want
I didn't
people.
spread that myth.
I don't want people
I didn't
to
spread that myth.
inadvertently or whatever spread this idea. I would prefer that people base these ideas, in facts, bring them up when it's actually relevant, rather than to explain Latino neo-Nazi mass shooter in the US. You being an expert on white supremacists in the US, I would hope that you could explain how this guy came to be without making a reference to South America, because I think it's pretty irrelevant.
But it wasn't specifically about this guy, man. Even in the tweet I'm responding to in that screenshot, it was specifically about the rise of white supremacy within the Latino and Hispanic communities. That's simple. That's simple, dude. So people come from South America, Mexico, Central America, all over to the United States, right? That's where they immigrate from, and they come to this country, right? So it's not a thing that's there. Certainly, they're learning a lot of it here, without a doubt. This kid specifically, who did this guy, this fucking mass shooter, this white supremacist neo-Nazi shooter, he, without a doubt, based on his specific background, got this shit in the U.S. He did post a lot of photos on his social media channels, though, of Mexican white nationalists in Mexico, like literal white neo-Nazi rallies in the streets of Mexico. But again, the specific article I was replying to was someone mocking the idea of the headline of the article being that the growing white supremacy in Hispanic and Latino communities. And I quickly looked for an article, saw a headline that specifically did not specify any country, because to me, it's not a specific country's problem. Again, I told you the first country I think of in modern day would be Brazil. And so I posted a screenshot of that headline. I mean, and anything else is you reading into it. And if you
it's not me
have a problem
reading into it, because our actions, are influenced by broader cultural trends, by broader cultural osmosis. We're not just we don't just have these specific intentions that we're all using. And you can also do things by accident. You can spread damaging ideas by accident without meaning to do so. Because there are these trends that I'm sure you're well aware of Americans projecting, deflecting onto other countries. For example, religious fanaticism in the US, they say, are we the Taliban now? Stuff like that. Neo-Nazi mass shooter, are we like Argentina now? Stuff like that. So when I see someone referencing South America or Argentina or whatever, and related to a neo-Nazi mass shooting in the US, what I see in that, as someone who is very familiar with these sorts of stereotypes, with these sorts of deflections, is that. And you might not have intended it, but that's how it comes off.
Okay. I mean, if that's how it came off to you, then, I mean, that's
it came
a problem,
off like
I
that to me and lots of other people. I know you mentioned the right-wing Argentines, but I'm sure they weren't all right-wing. I'm sure there were plenty of people in there who were just fucking sick. Who were just fucking sick of these Americans, pointing specifically to them all the time.
This conversation you're having now with me, though, is way different than the conversation you had on Twitter with me, and the conversation you had just even 10 minutes ago and before that, the rest of the live stream, where you were just trying to claim that just bring up the fact was some sort of propaganda, imperialism for the United States.
It's not just bringing up the fact, though. It's referring to the stereotype of Argentina as the special Nazi haven. I know it said South America, but when people think Nazis in South America, we all know what they're thinking. When Americans think it especially, we all know what they're thinking. I know why they think that. I think I've explained well enough why they think that.
Then
if you want to just say that you didn't mean it or whatever, okay, sure, but you don't need to mean it for it to nonetheless, be spread through the message that you sent, through the tweet that you sent.
I mean, the weirdest thing to me is, regardless, you tell me all the things wrong with the United States of America. It's horrible history. You could bring up genocide of the Native Americans. You could bring up slavery. You could bring up how we treated African Americans, Black Americans in this country after during the Civil Rights era. You could bring up the Nazis we brought into this country. You will see nothing from me denying it. In fact, I implore more and more people to talk about
I'm not
it.
saying
Talk
that
about
you
real
believe
American
that.
history.
I'm not saying that you believe that.
But I will say it is very weird, very fucking weird, that bringing up Nazis in Argentina, you don't get a discussion about it. You don't get a
There have been discussions about it, though. There was like 20-year-long government inquiry. That's what the report that we spoke about.
Okay, so I guess we can't talk about
in.
Nazis. I guess we can't talk about Nazis in Argentina.
No, you can.
Or,
you can.
Because if you were born after that,
just randomly bringing them up based on damaging cultural stereotype, which primarily exists because of imperialism, which is constantly used to legitimize imperialism. That's different. That's the issue.
I mean, I think it's completely fair to bring up the historical context of, yes, there is a history of Nazis and neo-Nazis and white supremacists finding safe harbor in Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Peru.
I think there are better ways to do this without inadvertently spreading these sorts of damaging stereotypes. I think, for example, let's go back to the example that I used earlier. I know that you think it's not exactly the same, but I think it's a kind of similar, inadvertent, perhaps, spread of a stereotype, like an African-American politician who is corrupt and being like, oh, plenty of African countries are corrupt. You know, I think that would be pretty out of place to explain the actions of like a guy of like African descent in the USA, and it would be like referring back to damaging stereotypes about Africa.
If there was an African American president who was accused of some corruption, I agree it would be racist to bring up Africa. If there was a conversation sparked from that about how Africans cannot be corrupt, then I would without a doubt say, no, we could bring up African countries. And that's exactly the scenario that happened here. There was a Mexican American shooter that did a horrible act. This dude, without a doubt, was inspired by Nazis and white supremacy here in the United States, and based on his social media feed, probably at the very least was looked up to that same sort of what's going on in Mexico too with neo-Nazis and white supremacists, but mostly without a doubt the United States of America. But there was a conversation that was sparked from that about Latino and Hispanic communities as a whole. And I think you would agree that if there was an equivalent where all of a sudden, after an African-American president was charged with corruption, there were articles about how, oh, African countries, they can't be corrupt. What's going on here? This is bullshit. You would think it would be fair game to then bring up that actually there is a pretty long history of African countries being led by pretty corrupt leaders. Probably some of the most corrupt in the whole world.
More relevant one being an African American and then referring to Africa
it's not.
To explain their
because
actions.
It's not, because that's not what I did. Like, why do you continue?
Well, you
to
referred to
avoid...
South America to sort of as an explanation for how this guy can be a Latino white supremacist. I believe there are better ways to make that same point. For example, by explaining how a Latino American can actually be a white supremacist rather than just lazily pointing to a cultural signifier that is the Nazi Argentina idea.
No, it's not just to point to a lazy cultural signifier, to show that there's a long history of it, that it's not some new trend that all of a sudden, because you know what the conversation would be then. Everybody's a white supremacist now.
I think the Nazis in South America, they're all white, like blonde-haired, blue-eyed. It's kind of a very different thing, really. You can't really explain like a brown Mexican-descended neo-Nazi by pointing to Argentina or Brazil or Bolivia.
Well, why can't you describe Argentinians that way?
Like what?
You just said you can't describe Argentinians as like your words, like a brown-skinned.
No, I'm referring to Nazis,
individual.
Like Nazis who came from Germany, right? They were like white people. So it stands to reason that them and their kids would also be white people.
I mean, they would be certainly could possibly be white, sure, but they could also have darker complexions too. I'm a little confused.
Pointing towards these German, like literal Germans who migrated to South America as like an explanation for a brown-skinned man or brown-skinned white supremacists in the United States of America, to me, that doesn't really make sense.
Why doesn't it? If you're trying to say
Because there's a
Argentinian
clear
people with
racial component to right. So there's a racial contradiction there in this guy's
so you're trying to
ideology.
say
He thinks he's
are
a
you
part
trying
of
to
the
say
white
that if
master race, and that like Nazis would love him or something.
so are you saying that if if someone in Argentina is a descendant from a Nazi from Germany, like the guy came over from Germany, had a family with someone in Argentina, you're saying that that kid, even though he might have lighter skin and lighter complexion, you're saying they wouldn't be Latino as well, even though their mother would be an Argentine
I don't
native?
know. Maybe would he in the U.S.? I don't know. You guys have
I
everything
would
fucked
say
up here. What I would
no. I
say
don't
is
think
the
it's very
fundamental
simple. If you
contradiction, because Latino is
Ugh,
not. It's not a race. The
not a good
fundamental
answer.
contradiction in that guy's ideology has nothing to do with his descent from Mexico as compared to Argentina. These places are incredibly far from each other. It doesn't really make much sense to really bring it up in the first place. But we're talking about like the racial contradiction here is what those Americans were saying he can't be a Nazi referring to, because to them he's this brown guy. You're right. He's excluded from whiteness. He's excluded from white supremacy. To them, I don't think an Argentine like descendant of Nazis would be excluded from that. I don't think they would be like, oh, he's a Latino. I think they would welcome him with open arms. And that's the fundamental contradiction they need explained to them. They don't need like lazily pointing to like a cultural signifier of Argentina being the Nazi country.
I mean, I think it's very relevant in terms of everything we just mentioned. I mean, we're just gonna disagree. I guess agree to disagree here.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know what else to say. I mean, I don't know what to say honestly. Is there any other point you want to make? I mean, I guess feel free. I'm happy to stay on the stream and listen to whatever else you got to say. But I don't know what else on my end. Go ahead.
No. Tell Sam Seder that he needs to tell AOC to vote no on increasing the State Department budget.
Okay, sure.
Thank you for relaying that message.
I'm sure he has that direct line to.
Oh yeah, no problem, no question.
I mean, the weird thing is, it seems like you and I come to, at least from what you're telling me, come to an agreement on everything except the fact that you seem to not like the context I brought up this history.
The disagreement isn't with our specific political views in this case. My disagreement with you is how you inadvertently spread this damaging idea that is weaponized against the, like not the left, but like, the compromise, like the Lula types in our country. It's used to link them with this idea of them having like a fundamentally irredeemable Nazi ideology. And that hurts.
There's no one in this country that thinks that Lula is a Nazi. In fact, he's very well liked in this country.
What I meant to say there was that in Argentina, the politicians who are linked to Nazism via this fact they identify with Peronism, they are more like Lula than like anything else that I could think to compare them with. Nonetheless, they are branded as Nazis because of this Argentina Nazi special safe haven stereotype, particularly by Americans, constantly in the American media too. And that is damaging. And I would prefer that people do not spread this stereotype, because then it can be used to hurt these politicians here who, as imperfect as they are basically, the lesser evil compared to the like imperialist backed neoliberals.
Okay.
And that's what I don't like.
All right. So, I mean, I don't know what else to... I mean, I guess I could say the same to you again about... Because, again, this is the same conversation that could be had with Ukraine. It really is. And it's silly to say you can't talk about the very real problem in Ukraine with neo-Nazis. Because...
I think this is also kind of different, because there's not like some sort of massive, as of like neo-Nazi militia in Argentina. There's not like a massive neo-Nazi movement in Argentina. The fascist movement in Argentina right now is just Trump-inspired. They call themselves libertarians, but they're just like Trumpists. That like
I think Trump. That's up there, man. That's white supremacy.
Yeah, their ideology is imported from the USA. They're not like descendants of like the Nazis who came to Argentina. They're just like fucking losers who got told by this guy that like abolishing every single social program will make them rich.
I mean, I don't know how else to bring up the fact that it does. There is an analogous situation there, being that you keep bringing up that the Imperial Americans use the historical fact that Nazis are in South America in general, but Argentina in this case, and how Russia uses that same thing
I think the difference
to.
here is the war and R. It's the tense.
Right now, there is a very real war going on in Argentina. The imperialism's happening right now. Excuse me. There's a war going on in Ukraine. I'm sorry.
I
Excuse
believe
me.
the problem
The
is. I
imperialism.
believe
The
the problem is
imperialism
that
having now.
the Nazis that we're
The
talking
imperialism's having
about
now.
were about 70, 60 years ago, and the Nazis in Ukraine, they're there right now. If there was like an actual straight
Dude, there
up
are
like
Nazis. There are
German
Nazis in.
German rat
There are
line linked
Nazis.
neo-Nazi movement in Argentina right now that was like armed and dangerous and shit and like
You don't
tying
gotta be.
Romani people to
You don't gotta
posts,
be.
I would be screaming about them. But what I'm
You
screaming
don't
about
got.
right now is actually the US backed Trump inspired fascists.
You don't have to be a literally descendant of Nazi Germany to be a Nazi, buddy. I mean, come on.
Okay. But there's not like an Azov tier Nazi problem in contemporary Argentina.
No, I don't. That'd be your specialty. So I guess I'll defer to you there. I wouldn't. I don't know about that.
Okay.
I mean,
If
I
there
would. I
was
would
an
highly
Azov
doubt.
tier,
I would highly doubt there's not.
a massive like Azov level neo-Nazi problem in
Yeah, not.
Argentina.
Yeah.
I'd certainly appreciate you talking about it,
I.
but
w-
luckily there
I
isn't.
should. Yeah. Luckily there isn't. But to act like there's no neo Nazis in any military, it would be. I mean, that's a huge draw.
Well, luckily Argentina
Um.
completely destroyed its military after the US-backed Nazi-inspired dictatorship used it to murder 30,000 leftists. So that was pretty good. Now it's just a jobs program for like 2,000 losers.
Huh. Um. I mean, I guess this was an interesting conversation. We again. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I feel like we're just talking in circles now. I could see my audience and your audience sort of getting. I don't know.
Oh, don't worry. I think this was very
They want.
clarifying.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so too.
Okay, great talking to you, man.
Was there anything else you wanted to say?
Nope, that's all. Thanks. See ya.
All right, cool. Have a great night.
Oh, my opponents are so fucking dumb. I mean, you can't say it's not in bad faith when he just refused over and over again to admit that there even exists this stereotype of Argentina being like a special Nazi haven, because the issue, obviously, as I said, literally a dozen times, isn't that there were no Nazis who came to Argentina. It's that Argentina was one of like 20 countries that did the same thing, yet it is the one that's the only one that's ever talked about in like the mainstream, and it's the only one that has like this cultural idea of it being like a special Nazi haven that is used to both deflect from like the same thing that happened in other countries to legitimize imperialism against the Argentine left that claims lineage from Peron. There's also the fact that the US right now is like alarmingly Nazi. At least like the Nazi groups there are very open, very... Obviously there's open Nazis in a lot of places, but the US is kind of the exporter of global Nazism right now. Australia is also fucking huge. Australia and the US are the two most like... I guess Australia doesn't have the mass shootings, but Australia and the US are definitely the like the two main countries with these massive like open neo-Nazi movements right now. Though the Nazis in Australia, I don't think they actually have like any links to mainstream politicians, though I haven't really been keeping up with it. I could be wrong. The Nazis in the US, like, you know, they're like part of like the Trump movement and probably going to be part of the DeSantis movement as well, regardless of how much they denounce them. I mean, I don't buy the idea that he or anyone who uses Twitter who posts about politics who's ever heard of Argentina doesn't know of like the Nazi Argentina stereotype. It's not true. There's no fucking way.